Okay, good afternoon, everybody. You've joined us live on our watch party. My name is Jim. This is Roger,
Yep.
and we are your guest hosts this afternoon as we go down memory lane. The episode we're going to be looking at is Court Martial,
Court martial, yeah.
which is kind of interesting. I've seen it a few times. A couple things I remember. Of course, everybody remembers Finney because of the name and all that stuff. I think, and we'll find out if I'm right or not, but I think the lawyer's name was Sam Cogswell or something like that. And him I remember
Cogley. Yeah.
Cogley. That character I remember because of his fondness for books and his distrust of technology. Reminded me very much of, of course, Leonard McCoy back in the original series.
This is actually one of my favorite episodes. I watch it quite, and my wife likes it too. We watch this one quite often. Yeah.
And this is every now and then you get a bonus for watching an episode, and the bonus is that for whatever reason they have to do an unusual shot for the story. So, like in this, I think it's This Side of Paradise, with the spores, we have that wonderful bridge pan that turned out to be oh so valuable for later versions of Star Trek because they could use that as a master. That gave us an incredible look at what the bridge looks like without people on it.
Right.
And in this one, we see quite a few extremely close-up views of the buttons on the captain's chair, which ironically were not the normal buttons. They were on the captain's chair. And I think it's going to be pretty apparent when you see it here.
They must have swap out panels.
I think they really did. I think they literally just replaced that whole top section. Because when the original seat sold in the first Robert Justman auction, I think it was, it became apparent. And if you go see it up in Pop Sci, if it's still up in Seattle, because they've been selling a lot of their exhibits off, but if it's still up there, and I believe it is, you'll see that the button configuration on it is not a configuration that was used in the series. They were apparently, when the guy got it, he was trying to reconfigure it to something. I read the story once, can't remember off the top of my head, but he was trying to reconfigure it, and that's how it ended up the way it looks. So if you actually compare pictures of it from up there in Seattle with pictures on the set, the first thing that you're going to notice is, well, wait a minute, the entire right arm is wrong. It doesn't match anything. And that's how that happened. I'm going to catch us up a few people here, Roger. So,
okay.
All right. So, SFF 1987. Good afternoon, my friend. He was the first one in the gate. I think he actually commented just before we went live.
Hey, SFF.
Alexandria, we are so happy to see you here today. You guys may not be able to see this just yet, but you can imagine the squeaky things. This is a prototype. Which, if I can get my left and right straight, might help you guys. A prototype of what, you might say? Well, so those of you who've been around for a while know that I tend to focus predominantly on the original series, and I've learned, and as Roger can attest to, and I've learned that I always will. I really somewhat naively thought, 3 years ago, hey, I'll start this and we'll spend a year or so on what I called season 1. If you actually go back and look at some of the real old videos, I'll refer to season 1, which is our Star Trek 60s. And then, the next year rolled around and I said, oh, coming soon, season 2, 70 Star Trek. And of course, then the folly of my naming conventions immediately began to hit me when I got suddenly deluged with, let's call them well-meaning trolls, shall we, that pointed out to me, season 2 wasn't the 1970s. You don't know what you're talking about. It's like, okay, yeah, you're absolutely right. I wasn't referring to season 2 of Star Trek. I was referring to season 2 of Trek World. Maybe not such a good idea. So season 3 never got mentioned. But the intention was do TOS, do the movies, do The Next Generation, and then take them in order of production. And I've already started doing, we're almost completely through the episode summaries, at least for The Next Generation in the community feed. But I really, really, really like Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And some people may disagree with me in that, and some people may not. I think it has more of a following than most people imagine. So you're going to start seeing, specifically from the video content, some Deep Space Nine stuff coming your way. Now, we flirted with it a little bit when we watched the watch party a few weeks back for the Trials and Tribulations episode. There are some other classic episodes that I'm going to drag in front of you guys kicking and screaming because they represent, in my opinion, some of the very best Star Trek ever written. In the Pale Moonlight, Far Beyond the Stars. There's a whole bunch of
Blood Oath was pretty good, I thought. Too.
Blood Oath, which actually brought us back. Every one of the Klingon captains from the original series.
I love this so much.
We got to see what happened to them or what happened with their characters. So you're going to see some Deep Space Nine show up, in addition to the original TOS stuff, which isn't going to go anywhere because I have so much stuff to do and not enough time to do it. So I'll be doing it till the day I die. So it'll be around for a while, but you're going to see some DS9 stuff. If you've never watched DS9 and you are a Gen 1 Star Trek fan, meaning that you're one of the people I've identified as, been around since the 60s and remembers the original series, I encourage you to give it a try. Come to a watch party or two. Listen to the conversations. I think, in all honesty, you're going to be pleasantly surprised if you've never really seen it. It got a really, really bad knock in the 1980s and early 90s because of its serialized content, which made it extremely difficult to follow because it was syndicated. So it wasn't like every night, every Thursday night at 8. Now, most channels did, in fact, show it every week at a specific time because let's face it, Star Trek was the single biggest cash cow in the syndication market in the 1980s and 90s. It probably earned more money than the entire syndicated market combined for all of the shows. But people didn't like, in general, the serialized content. It enjoyed a renaissance on Netflix about, 20 years ago, ironically, shortly after, I guess, the remasters came out.
Right.
And because let's face it, streaming is where binge watching was invented. And if there's ever been a Star Trek series worth binge watching, this is it. Because especially when you get into Dominion War towards the last of the 7 years, the last 3 of the 7, I think, it literally, there's a ton of stuff that literally ends with to be continued or to be followed up on. They may not stamp to be continued on it. They are complete self-standing episodes, but they will recall back upon themselves sort of the way that Supernatural did through its entire 15-season run. So if you haven't watched it, hang around, give it a few times. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. If you do and you still don't like it, that's perfectly fine. Leave in the comments why you don't like it. There are no right or wrong answers when it comes to Star Trek TV shows. We don't all like the same things. And the only thing that I ask, and you guys have been remarkable about in 3 years, is to be tolerant of each other's likes and dislikes. This group, fortunately, on the community page and in the comments, has not descended into the, I hate this version, I hate you guys are idiots, some of the mudslinging that goes on, unfortunately, in just about every other Star Trek community I've seen.
Yep.
So just be respectful to each other, and we can all, benefit from this. So I think there's some really nice stuff coming. So if you're familiar with it, then prepare to curl up with an old friend, because let's face it, we're talking 30 years plus here. And a lot of these episodes are very much like the episodes like Court Martial. I watched it once or twice, and I haven't seen it in 30 years. So today is kind of important to me. And a lot will say the same thing with Deep Space Nine. Right. I'm going to move down a little bit more here.
I was just going to say hi to Alexandria because I know you said hi earlier, and I didn't see the message pop up till just now. So.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Hey, Ronald.
Hey, Ronald, good to see you here this afternoon. Yeah. Red Shirt Bob, always great to see you here.
Red Shirt Bob, welcome.
Ronald L. Deep Space Nine is one of my favorite series. Such a wide variety of characters and the depth of characters. And that's what I'm talking about, Ronald. You and I can talk forever, and we probably will when those watch parties go. Some of the characters there defy everything. Garak, probably my favorite character, non-bridge crew character in the entire Star Trek universe. Definitely the most three-dimensional and the most emotionally defined character ever, period. They'd never, in my opinion, nobody's ever written a character art like Garak for any TV, for any of the Star Trek television series, even with the main characters. I absolutely love them. Yes, I agree with you, Tim. I think my memory of this was really good.
Agreed, Tim.
I could be interested to see what my reaction is to the heartbeat scene at the end, because there's some dichotomy between it and the series in general, because this is the only time they ever actually show us this kind of, they have the ability to listen for a specific heartbeat. And one of the big key features in Star Trek The Next Generation were the comm badges told everybody where everybody was, but more importantly, they could tell if the number of people on or off the ship was wrong. So theoretically, the Enterprise should have always been able to tell with the proper amount of horsepower behind the compute, if there was something amiss by even something as small as one. Now, granted, it was only filtering out one heartbeat when they'd gotten just about everybody off the ship. So there's a limitation there. So I'll be interested in how I respect and what you guys think about it when it comes up.
Let me just throw out there too, Jim, couple points from the episode. This episode is unique for me because Richard Webb, who plays Finney in the episode, is actually right here from Central Illinois. So unfortunately, he's also on the hopefully it stays a short list of Star Trek actors from the original series that committed suicide too. So we lost him in '93, and I believe it was suicide, along with Stanley Adams from the Trouble with Tribbles, who played he was the guy that sold the Tribbles.
Cyrano Jones, yeah.
Cyrano Jones. He also committed suicide, unfortunately. So
I hate to say this, but I normally don't go into the in memoriam type of posts. I did for those of you who follow me on different social medias, and I put it in the community page too. I could not let the passing of Gene Winfield go without commenting. Matter of fact, I'll be honest with you folks, if you go to Facebook, if you go to some of these other areas, I am absolutely and utterly shocked at how little is being said by the social media creators of Star Trek. People that that I look up to and think, I'm aspiring to be like if they can run their channel like that and handle their people like that, that's where I want to be. And there's a surprising number of them that really don't know Star Trek emotionally the way that we do. And that's when these kind of things hit home.
Jim, real quick too, this morning when I got into YouTube, a video from Adam Schneider popped up, and it was a Gene Winfield interview. I don't know what the date on it was, whether it was new or old. I think it might have been older, but it looked like it.
Yeah, Adam used it from a different thing, and I have that too. It's going to be a smaller clip was in one of the original videos I did, and a large clip is in the full-length documentary coming up. Fortunately, we have a large amount of Gene Winfield footage available where he talked about the things, because he stayed very active in later years, reproducing the seats, because he kept the original molds and stuff. He would do things for people. He had a captain's chair in his basement. Depending on who you talk to, he had the captain's chair. No, he didn't. But the one he had was pretty damn good, and I'd take it any day of the year.
Me too.
All right, so let me see here for a second. So for those of you who have not done a watch party before, the way this works is this. You can see above me up here, watch.trek-world.com. If you type that into a browser, or if you have an Apple TV, a Chromecast, an Amazon, or a Roku TV, you can go to the web browser and you can run that app. It'll take you right to Court Martial and Pluto. It's probably, if you're using one of those sites, one of those devices, it's easier. Run the Pluto app and just go find Court Martial. But this will bring you to Pluto. You do not need to be registered. You do not have to pay. It will have commercials. It will be the CGI remastered version. Sorry, folks. And I'm doing something a little bit different today, and Roger didn't even have a chance for me to tell him about it. I'm going to start it in a moment, literally, because we start at 15 minutes past the hour. It's going to pop up on the screen here, and you're going to watch a series of 30-second screenshots. Okay, so there'll be, 100 of them roughly for a 15-minute show. This is to keep me out of jail. Okay, you cannot rebroadcast live, or you cannot rebroadcast commercial television on a live stream or anywhere else. It's not just a copyright violation. Rebroadcasting it on a live stream is a broadcast violation, and it is not the kind of thing. Well, let's just put it this way: it is a criminal violation and not a civil. I have no desire to go to jail. So normally what I do is I put up and we do the 30-second screenshots, and I run a little timer down the bottom. And then you can watch it in another device or in another window from that link. And then the timer gives you some idea of where we are with what you're watching, and everybody's pretty happy with it. But I took it a step further. I removed the timer, but I added all of the closed captions that were on the episode. So when we start it here in a moment, you're still going to be seeing one screenshot every 30 seconds, but the difference is going to be is as those screenshots fade in and out, you'll get what I mean when you watch it. Across the bottom is going to be the closed caption. So for those of us who don't watch it on another device, where we just want to talk to each other, watch the screen, that's going to be a visual reminder to let you know exactly what's going on in the scenes that you're seeing right now. Perfect example. SFF 1987. I watched this on my iPhone. Can't run 2 apps at once. Wish I was home. So we're going to try to make this a little bit better for you. All right. So let's go ahead and let's see what happens. I'm going to start the show. Ta-da. Now I'm going to press play. And hopefully nothing explodes. There is no sound, of course. I strip it out simply because I don't want to get in trouble. They say we'll even do off that, but okay, there it goes. And we start seeing the text. I apologize. Normally you do not see the control menus and the bars at the top and the bottom, but there's a certain magic in the Mac and in Windows as well that says if you want to see the subtitles, you got to see the controls. If you just let it play with the controls hidden, it turns the subtitles off. So here we go. This is the remastered episode, so we're going to see CGI, but more importantly, we're going to see some. I just love, and I mentioned this several times before, I just absolutely love watching the remastered for the live action. I mean, just look at that photo that we're staring at right now and ask yourself, when was the last time you have ever seen a still from it was taken from a streaming service? I stripped these photos out last night. That was taken from a streaming service in HD from the 60s. I mean, go pull up Mission Impossible, which might come the closest, but doesn't have the fidelity. And don't even get me started when you go into some of the classic TV shows, like the Ernie Allen shows, Lost in Space, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Great shows, great effects at the time. They haven't aged well visually on the screen, but that's because they haven't pumped millions into them the way that Star Trek has pumped money into. Let's face it, every time they invest in doing a reshoot or an edit or an upgrade, like they did with a motion picture remaster a couple of years back, it's nice to think they're doing it for our well-being, but they're not. They're doing it because you can hear the ka-chings in the background as soon as they do.
It pays dividends for Paramount, yes.
Murder You. I have a feeling, so subtitles, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes are famous for not really being what the person said, but what the system thought they said. And somehow I don't see the juxtaposition of the words murder and you together being correct in the context of what they're talking about. So, Tim, I agree with you entirely. I prefer the original the original effects.
Yep, me too.
But for me, I prefer them not because they're better than the CGI, even though I do think they are. Okay, but I prefer them because they're what I grew up with. They're the images that I remember, and I want to remember Star Trek that way. And the CGI versions, they don't cut it. One, they were pretty darn good for 20 years ago. Not so much now. Everybody talks about, well, I wish they'd take this, the behind the scenes footage that I've been posting. Why don't you use that and just remaster that? Well, unfortunately, all of the behind the scenes blue screen shots that you've seen from me and others, They were all rejected for a reason, and it's usually lighting related. You might see, if you look for it, you might quite often see, most likely, what I see more often than not, is a shadow cast on the left nacelle from the right nacelle, of course, because they shot it from the right-hand side most of the time, almost all of the time, except for once. You see a shadow fall across the inside of the right nacelle. Of the left nacelle. And when you remove the blue screen and you put it against space in a high contrast environment, that shadow actually amplifies. It jumps out at you. It isn't subtle like it is when we're watching it on the blue screen. So none of that footage, unfortunately, can be used. Yes, they could digitally reprocess it, but in today's day and age, just do CGI again. And I'm really shocked, in all honesty, that they have not just simply said, you know what? We're just going to go in. We're going to regenerate every library that we generated back in 2004 or whenever it was. And we're going to update the effects. That's what they did for Star Trek: The Motion Picture when they did the 4K update. They redid all the CGI. And I think you're going to see it again. I really do. There's been nothing official that I've ever seen, but I would think that we might see the very first, because remember that when they did this the last time, they premiered in syndication first, and they ran for about a year before they caught up and they released them on DVD or Blu-ray. But anyhow, I think we might actually see something as early as the 60th anniversary next year.
Too, we've talked about this before, Jim. It would be nice if one of the reasons I think we all, or a lot of us, prefer the original effects is because we just didn't grow up with them, but it's the perspective that was given in that episode with a certain shot is what we grew up with. And when they did CGI, they changed that perspective in many cases. The camera angles from a different angle, or the ships from a different shot from a different angle like that. And it changes the perspective of the episode for us. So I think that's a lot of it anyway.
Yeah, it pulls me out of the immersion, but I do want to acknowledge, because as we're talking about, it's perfect here, because this is where I'm at with Red Shirt Bob. He loves the original effects, still does, but he likes the new effects interesting and gives him credit for trying to get people watching. You see how easy I can read somebody's comment and make it sound like I said it myself? Didn't intend to do that, Red Shirt Bob. That's your quote. I give that for you.
Way to go, Bob.
But yes, especially you got to remember, this is the Okudas that were heading this project at the time. They took it as an opportunity to say, what would it have looked like if Gene and company had been able to film whatever they wanted? Okay. Most famously, there were no Klingon ships shown in The Trouble with Dribbles. Okay. Model wasn't ready yet. But there were many other times where models were available, but they opted, no, we'll just reuse the original footage. We won't make new ones because it costs money. But more importantly, it ate up time in post-production, and time is the fire in which we burn, if some of you remember that quote. Point of interest for that, by the way, that actor is the uncle of the actor Alexander Siddig, who plays Julian Bashir.
It would have been interesting had they reshot the effects CGI, but used the same angles, shot the original effects angles.
That's what I wish they had done, because a lot of people don't realize, and I need to do a video on this because, to be perfectly honest, it's low calories. I can produce this video and get it out soon. So maybe, what's the matter with me? But they rotoscoped many of the shots from the original series for the animated series. And for those of you who don't know what rotoscoping is think back to when you were a child and they gave you onion paper, trace paper, and you would lay it over a drawing or something, and you could take a pencil and you could apply pressure and trace the outlines of what's underneath. And because the onion paper was very transparent, you could duplicate the drawing almost perfectly, even if you had no skill, which I had no skill. So rotoscoping allowed them to actually analyze the movement on the camera. And then they produced the animated version in the animated series. And so almost all of the iconic shots that we're used to, the Enterprise turning into the screen that we see a lot on the, coming next week or whatever, that were used in some of the promos, not in the original run, but in syndication. some pretty neat looking stuff. So I really need to do one just on the animated series to point that out to people. So I think some people would be shocked. And it'd be even better. But the problem is they didn't always recreate. We were just talking about CGI wasn't creating scene for scene. So it may not be practical for me to say, okay, here is like the pilot dive into the saucer. Here's what it looked like in the cage. Here's what it looked like in CGI, which they did do in CGI. So I should be able to do that one. They were smart enough to leave that one alone. And here it is on the animated and see them running side by side. That'd be pretty neat.
Oh,
and that's something I really do need to do. And Tim, I wish I had your neighbors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was just reading that. That was pretty impressive.
Jetsons. Now that theme song's be running through my mind.
Yeah.
Thank you, Manly. Meet George Jetson.
How you doing, Manly?
It is so good to see him.
Yes, it is.
He had taken a little bit of sabbatical. I mean, well, for one thing, I keep moving the stupid times around between 3 and 4, but that has usually to do with the runtime of what we're looking at. McCoy has the hands of a surgeon. Somebody's quoting death.
Yes, sir.
Apparently, a lot of other people wish they had your neighbors, Tim.
Yeah.
It's a minor inconvenience, Red Shirt Bob. I'm sure we'll figure out some way to do that. It's nice to hear that it's not my doggies. Is that so? Is that Buddy or is that Millie?
That is Millie, and it's dinner time for the. So that is Millie you're hearing. Yep. She barks incessantly until she gets her bowl.
Yeah, let he who is without sin cast the first stone will never be me.
Yeah.
The number of times that Dax or Ezri or anybody else, because you can tell I like Star Trek named animals, the number of times they bark, run through here, Dax is asleep at my feet. I got to do it. Because several people have asked about
there you go. Yeah.
Come on.
Dax up here.
She's not likely to be happy with me, but come on, Dax. Your adoring public awaits. That is what is known as a rabbit dachshund. They are not recognized by the AKC Kennel Club here in the United States. Fully grown, which she is. She's about 5 years old now, maybe 4. She weighs 8 pounds, which is tiny, 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 tiny for dachshund. The miniature dachshunds that you see, and I have another one that's Ezri. She's not here with me right now. Dax and I are like father and daughter. She just bonded very strongly. I've never bonded with an animal like this before. I was not that kind of animal person the way my wife was and stuff like that. The standard miniature dachshund will generally go somewhere between 10 and 19 pounds, depending on their weight and their size, and their shape, their health. And then a regular dachshund can go another 10 pounds on top of that. We have 3. We have Dax, who's a rabbit dachshund. Then we've got Ezri, which is a miniature, and Cricket. There's a non-Star Trek name, but there's a backstory for that. He's a regular dachshund. And unfortunately, Cricket is our oldest. She's about 10 years old. And she's what taught me, do not let your dachshunds get heavy.
Oh, yeah.
It's bad on their back. But the other thing that I find absolutely incredible is you can count calories, you can starve them. That body shape never goes away. Nobody's been able to get her down. And in fact, she weighs about 30 pounds, and it's going to cut her life expectancy in half. The smaller the dachshund, the longer they expect to live. The rabbit dachshunds have a general lifespan approaching 20 years. This one is just tired. Normally, she would be the center of attention. Yeah. Now she just wants to go lay back down on her bed. Alexandria says, "Puppy."
Puppy. Yeah, Millie our Miss Millie just turned 14 a couple weeks ago. So she's a rescue beagle. So.
Hey, SWAT cats.
SWAT cats.
Draw it. I demand it. And right now, Commodore Star, right now. out of that wood grain for mica table of the future. It is so funny that Roddenberry was so famous all throughout the making of Star Trek and stuff, of telling people it had to be alien. The one very famous story about the plant. No matter what they found, it just looked like a regular potted plant. So he grabs it and turns it upside down, sticks it back in there in the vase with its roots and stuff dangling around like one of those old-fashioned fiber optic lights, and goes, "Now that's an alien plant." So in one scene, he's pushing for things that don't look natural. And in the very next scene, there's a styrofoam cup on the bridge.
Yep.
Which I think is better than the water bottle showing up in Game of Thrones, right? or the Starbucks coffee cup that shows up in front of Daenerys.
We just missed the Saurian brandy bottle, too. And where Kirk walks into the room.
Did it show it or cut it out?
Huh?
So did it show it or did it cut it out?
No, I think it cut it. I think it missed the shot. But yeah, he walks in and pulls the stopper out, gets ready to pour a drink when he sees that Cogley's there. So Sam Cogley's there.
Hey, Manley. Manley touches another thing that we all tend to have in common. Not everybody does, but a lot of us do that are Gen 1, and that is we remember the birth of the concept of the personal computer.
Yep.
So every one of us knows what an Altair computer looks like. Don't feel bad if you don't know. It's not like it's an exclusive club that got us any points, because it didn't. Okay. But Manley, you might appreciate this. Throughout the years, I have collected not only every in PDF format, every magazine ever printed for things like Popular Electronics, Popular Science, and Creative Computing, but I also have the complete run of Byte magazine. And nothing makes you remember the early days of there and stuff than Byte magazine, because it actually predated most of, I'm pretty sure, it predated things like the TRS-80 Model 1, the very first generation of, Apple II, the things that were designed to go to people who were hobbyists but weren't necessarily computer science or mathematics majors. I talked about this before, but I have to admit, of captains on the Enterprise, of captains of Star Trek, Shatner had to be probably the most photogenic person I'd ever.
Yeah.
He very rarely takes a bad picture. And even today, with his advanced age and the fact that, he looks different significantly than he did, he still never takes a bad picture. I wish I looked half that good when I'm his age. Actually, I wish I lived to be that age, which does actually also bring out, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I will have to say, 10 bells for the loss of Gene Hackman this week.
Yes. Yep.
For those of you who may not have caught up on the coroner's report yesterday, it actually it's very tragic. She died first. She appeared to be sick with what she thought was the flu. In reality, it's
Hantavirus
or Hantavirus. I can't remember how it's pronounced. But anyhow, she came in contact with infected feces of a specific mouse, or in some cases, larger rodents like rats can carry it. But she came in contact with it. It cannot be spread from person to person,
right?
Which is why Gene didn't die from it. She came in contact with it. She thought she had the flu. It is respiratory, and its mortality rate is between 38 and 50%. She had an open bottle of pills on the floor, which had a lot of people questioning how she died. She literally was miserable and was in the bathroom, probably taking whatever the next pill was to try to make her try to feel better, when she just literally lost the strength to stand, and she passed away on the floor. Gene, in addition to just being old, which we knew, he also was suffering from advanced end stages of Alzheimer's, which is basically, the internal organs are shutting down, the whole 9 yards. He died of a heart attack because he had a very bad heart history, multiple heart surgeries, so on and so forth. Again, 95, can't say that, it didn't work for him in the long run. Yep. But what was absolutely, I'm going to put her down. What was absolutely tragic for me was they determined that he died a week after she did.
Yeah.
And the scenario that's running through everybody's mind is that he kept rediscovering her body. because
yeah.
and inevitably the stress of it, he had a heart attack. The one time he got more, one time he either got more upset. Actually, that's the sad part with Alzheimer's. He could probably have a full-blown, almost heart attack, forget about it 10 minutes later, but his body still bore the stress. Or worse yet, you can have a heart attack and get through it and not really know it, because people will quite often go in after the fact and on the EKG or whatever, one of the different tests they connect you to, I think it's an ECG, the encephalograph or whatever, they can say, oh, you had a cardiac event that you didn't even know you had.
Right.
But he lived in that house with her corpse for 11 days? It's at least a week, but I want to say 11 days, but at least a week. That explains why the dog that was found in the bathroom with her was still alive. Nobody's talking about what happened to the other dog, but I would bet it was infected with the feces as well.
Well,
but they're not actually saying, as far as I know. Did you hear something, Roger?
Well, the one that was in the bathroom passed away. That was in a kennel. It was in a crate in the bathroom closet. That's the one that passed away.
Okay.
My understanding. And then there was one running loose in the house, and then the front door was ajar, and there was one out in the yard. Is what the way I had heard it.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
I don't know. I haven't read anything about it, but my guess would be the one that was in the crate died because it didn't get food or water. Because she was probably not only taking care of Jean, she was probably, and herself, she was probably also feeding the dogs. If the door was open and the other two dogs could get in and out of the house, chances are they could find something to eat, even grass. I mean, our dogs eat grass, or water somewhere that they could get, versus, being stuck in a crate. So.
I had a Commodore 64 also, Ronald. I love my Commodore 64, actually. Actually, the all-time heart winner for me was the Amiga series. I had every last one of the little monsters.
Yep.
And I was absolutely amazed when I reached out a couple of years ago and hired Andrew Tobias to do renderings for me of the original Toscani, and couldn't figure out where I remembered his name from, only to remember after the fact that he was quite well known doing the rendering animations in the very early days of the Commodore Amiga. And that's where I recognized his name.
Huh.
IBM Clone Desktop. Ooh, Red Shirt Bob was rich.
He was an Apple Macintosh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, right around there, 1984, when it was, announced, because everybody remembers the commercial. I worked for Computerland, ironically, when the Apple Mac was released. I sold a lot of Macs, got a lot of bonuses from Apple. They even sent me to Disney. Me and one other, and a partner of my own choosing, went to Disney for a week on their ticket because of the amount of Macs I'd sold in little old Delaware. Was a vibrant Mac hater. Now, you'd never know that talking to me, because I sold computers for a living at that point, but I really resented the fact they couldn't run just about anything off the counter. And then, of course, my Amiga and even the Atari ST and a few of the others out there, I worked up other things. You could pop a Mac ROMs into it, and with third-party hardware, plug something in and run whatever could run on the original Mac. Now, Apple wasn't dumb. It wasn't too long before we had the Mac SE30, the Mac LC. They had all these different iterations of the Mac, and when that happened, of course, Amax, I think, was the name of the application. It no longer offered the brilliant compatibility that you wanted.
Well, you'll remember this, Jim, because we had a discussion about this one night, you and I. But my first home personal computer was a leftover IBM ThinkPad from the company that I work for. They sold off when they got new equipment. They would sell off the old, wipe them clean, and then sell them. Give them employees a chance to buy them. And so I still have it somewhere. I haven't charged it and started it in years, but it's still around here somewhere. So
Manley brings up a good point. James brought it up first. Hi, James. I don't know if I've actually spoken to you before. Welcome to our little corner of the galaxy. We hope that you enjoy yourself, or at least don't hate being here. We'll take that as a consolation prize. and hopefully we'll see you and entertain you more as the future goes on.
Yep.
Manley brings up a good question. I don't believe the first normal voice, though, was the Terminator. I think it goes back to things like Proteus, and I can't remember. Proteus might have been the name of the computer that was in the Dean Koontz movie about that had, I think it was Barbara Hershey or one of them, maybe Pamela Franklin, I don't know. But the supercomputer from where her husband works took over her home, traps her inside, and decides it wants to have a child with her. Yes, that's a kind of weird thing, but the movie worked really, really well. If you look it up.
Was that before or after 2001: Space Odyssey? Because of course you had HAL 9000, in 2001.
It might have been after, but it's hard to tell because it was shot sometime around the time of the Andromeda strain. So it could conceivably been filmed in the late 60s, and maybe it was.
That's true. Yeah.
And there were a couple others like that. There was Demon Seed, which I think had Barbara Hershey in it, I think. And those computers spoke with normal human male voices because it heightened the terror of the fact that this isn't a real thing, and yet what it's talking about is a biological interaction. And I'm sure somebody will come back in there and maybe even further back than that. But I think definitely the Terminator, I don't think it was the first one simply because of the time.
Right.
Daisy, Daisy. Hey, at least I got that other song out of my head.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do
that. Please stop, Dave.
You know what's really amazing is I absolutely love, because a lot of people didn't read the book, okay?
Right.
Because let's face it, with the exception of the Rama series, which I thought he wrote very, very conversationally, a lot of what we consider to be classic science fiction is pretty dry reading. Okay, it can be a chore to push your way through the Dune books, especially the first ones you ever read. If you get your hands on any one of the original Isaac Asimov books, he really pushed you just as hard on foundation and stuff like that. So a lot of people didn't read those. So it wasn't until 2010 came out that we realized that the reason that Hal went crazy, so it appeared, was because he'd been given conflicting orders. It's like the highest thing, sort of like what happened in Alien. The number one goal is get this biological sample back. Everybody's expendable, so it starts killing off the expendable things. But if you think about it, from like 69 or right around 1970 to 2010, a large number of the American public had no idea what drove Hal over the edge for a quarter century. It was just a mystery. And to find out the answer, it was one of those things just like, well, of course, that just makes so much sense. Now, I'm not quite sure we would have reacted to it or understood it the same way prior to 2010, because let's face it, by 2010, even our friends next door that could never have used a Commodore 64, they're running, Quicken on their PCs at home. So people were much acceptable. They were used to computers by 2010.
That movie, The Year We Made Contact, 2010, The Year We Made Contact, such a great movie, a great sequel, because it does answer so many questions that were put, in the movie 2001. And it answers so many questions. It was a really well done movie as well.
So I was jumping around a little bit. I apologize if some of you who are following us on the chat room see that I'm going back and forth because I'm trying to hit the, I want to make sure that if somebody brings up something that we acknowledge it. So I think you should take a stress pill and think things over. That's that was somebody else. That was a quote right in front of SF had it.
Yeah.
Is that the computer version of Take Two Aspirin and Call Me in the Morning?
Yeah.
You know what, Swat? I honestly think that it is, and I don't think that we'd ever be able to prove it or disprove it. But when you consider the way that Siri, especially, and the amount of money that was spent in how Siri sounded when it talked versus what the value of what it could say to you, Apple really nailed the Siri voice right out of the gate. And I have no doubt that when they did it, they were thinking about this thing needs to be able to do natural language speech, even if the words are a little slow coming. And how can you not think of Majel Barrett's voice in all the various Star Trek iterations? She was the prototypical, Now, I will say this, because it was mentioned in several of the behind-the-scenes Star Trek books, and it's also in several of the just history books and military books. The Air Force, and I think the space program in particular, but I think it was not when it was space. I think it was still in the test pilot stuff. They experimented with both male and female computer voices, or announcement voices. Let's put them that way. And they found that the female voice cut through the noise and ratcheted attention faster than the male voice. That it was just like an autonomic reflex from us. So I think picking the voice being female, and Gene doing that, I think definitely was influenced by NASA and Rand on why it should be a woman's voice. But the conversationalness and the conversationalness and just the generalized tone of the voice, I think that definitely influenced Siri and Alexa.
Agree.
Manly, you just nailed it. That's Dune in it, there are many books that I read that I wish I didn't. And I'll give you guys, one of the best examples I can think of is there's one of my favorite more modern day authors is a gentleman, I mentioned him in the video here, a gentleman by the name of Dean Koontz. And he's written a lot of stuff, and he wrote some really good horror, supernatural horror, Phantoms, which actually was almost a science fiction horror. He wrote some really good stuff way back when, and then he's gotten more into mainstream drama. But he has a book series based around this woman whose husband was a high-ranking military official that committed suicide. And she doesn't believe he committed suicide. And she begins to unravel this clandestine corruption conspiracy theory that runs all the way up through the world governments. And the last book I read, I think I was 7 or 8 books in, and each book is a push for getting to the next minor revelation, but not a push towards completing the narrative. And so Dean Koontz, I find, is probably the most guilty contemporary artist of that. If you just push it through just one more page, it'll all be worth its while.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with the Dune series, it got even worse because when Frank died and his son took it over, his son's actually a better writer than he is, but his son loves horror. He doesn't like science fiction. And as a result of that, his horror books read much more naturally and interactive than his. So for me, the Dune series, which I think went to like 20 some books or something like that, it really got painful, but I did read every last one of them because it was one of those things like you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. You can't bail out now. The book in the description, The Odyssey, with all the trash on it, so haunting, not in the film. So sad, SF. Yeah, exactly. Roy Scheider. Oh, man. I have watched him recently.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. I probably watched it. I probably watched Jaws recently, probably about 6 or 7 times in the past 2 or 3 months. Right. It is the ultimate noise movie. I play movies on my TV at night, every night, because I'm editing. I have a full-time job for the next 7 or 8 months. I retire in January. I have a full-time job working as a senior IT project manager for a global automotive manufacturer. And they pulled us back into the office after 5 years, which was rather painful. So I've always stayed up late and worked, but I was always also able to multitask during the day. And now I can no longer do that effectively. So I stay up late at night editing. editing, writing, searching, copying, pasting, you name it. So I put movies on that I'm comfortable and familiar with to
And
run.
talking to and chatting with me twice a week. So
Yep. And so Jaws is one of them. And I think it actually started after Roger and I were. He told me about a video that he'd seen on YouTube about the one incident that apparently occurred at Universal in Florida, and I did watch that video. Thank you for bringing that up.
did you? Okay, yeah.
But as a result of that conversation, I watched Jaws twice in the past 2 or 3 weeks.
It is a great movie. It is.
There is an absolutely haunting video that you can find on YouTube of Richard Dreyfuss and the daughter of the man who played Quint. I can't think of his name right now. Robert something.
Robert Shaw.
Okay, yeah. Shaw had passed, and I wish I could tell you how old the video is. I don't know, except I do know that Dreyfuss looks like he looks now, so it obviously had been within the past 10 years or so. And thinking back on Shaw and their friendship over the years, when he's talking to his daughter, and the show was the Graham Norton Show, which is their version of Johnny Carson in England, with the only difference being they didn't stop doing it. I mean, it's an awesome show. I recommend it highly. But anyhow, just thinking back about Robert brought Dreyfuss to tears. That they got that close as a result solely of just working in this movie originally. Mm-hmm. Great movie, yes. Great actors, every last one of them in there.
Yep, absolutely.
Starbase. Yeah, at least we kept Rowan and Martin out of it. We could have had what was it, Goldie Hawn popping in through one of the air vents, with her painting tattoos.
Exactly.
I had read that. I forgot about that, but yeah, I had read that sometime way back when. SWAT Cats, thank you. Star Trek Continues does so much more than Surprise. I've had an opportunity to trade emails several times with Vic, and he's offered to chat, and I'd love to chat, but I don't want to waste his time. I don't have anything specific to chat on. And the last thing I want to do is fanboy and tie up somebody's time. Right. That series is beyond amazing because of the conscious decision that he made to produce it so that it looked 100% like it was shot in the 60s. What James Cawley did cannot be discounted. Not at all. Okay. And the legacy of what he did lives on in the Star Trek tour in Ticonderoga. And so we're all indebted to him for that. And it was him that brought us Vic, who was cooperating or collaborating on one of the episodes. And quite famously, they didn't really get along. And so suddenly, Vic, takes his next idea down to what was, I think, the Star Trek Exeter set in Georgia, and history is made. But Vic, Star Trek Continues as an art form. It really could have been the 4th season and partial 5th season, especially today, where they only have maybe like 10 episodes a year if you're lucky.
Yep.
I remember Caves of Steel, but man, I haven't thought about that since I was a kid.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He really was, Troy. And the other thing that really amazed me about him, especially in the early years, he was such a fan of Star Trek. Very well respected. I mean, everybody that, back in Bacon and all the other stuff, especially back in the 1960s, he was the closest thing to like royalty, I think, in all honesty, in the science fiction world. Everybody respected him. Last time I checked, he wrote like 483 books. And when you look at his bibliography, the man wrote on everything. He didn't write just on science fiction. He wrote religious books. His autobiography, I think, was called In Memory Yet Green or something like that. He wrote about everything, and he was extraordinary. Hey, Paul.
Paul's joining.
You up on the screen. Paul, I just want to give you a heads up. I did reach out to Karen. I couldn't take it any longer. A couple other people, one person called in our viewer comment line and said, there's a lady you need to talk to. So I reached out to Karen. I made contact with her. She and I will probably chat sometime in the next month or so at her convenience. Same thing. She lives a very active life. And so, I don't want to interfere. And I told her that. But at the same time, I want to talk to her about her dad. Paul is one of the group of people that have given me a lot of insight into the things that happened in the Los Angeles area back in the 1960s that I was unaware of. And one of the things that Paul did real early on was he told me when I was looking for something on the Galileo, I think it was Trek Magazine issue 9. I'm not sure. I ended up buying all of them because he couldn't remember. He said it was issue 9. So I bought all of them so that I could find it, and I found it. But he told me I did this great article on this, in this episode or in this version. And then I stumbled off another article he did with Franz Joseph. And I'm thinking, oh my word, you know what? I don't think there's very many interviews out there with Franz Joseph. I mean, matter of fact, Paul really, in my opinion, is the only living person that has any, I don't want to say credibility, let's just call it provenance, that can produce a contemporary interview that everybody recognizes, should remember, but could never question. Right. But a lot of what I read in his stuff and in other people's stuff fascinated me, not necessarily about, well, tell me about the tech manual. No, I'm not interested in the tech manual. I'm interested in the things that led to it. I'm interested to the drawings that he did first for his son and for his friends that would come into the house. And I've heard stories about how it became like an impromptu meeting place, or a watering hole that, like, once a week or whatever, his friends and his son's friends stuff, they would all come in and they'd talk about Star Trek. And I do know that when I was doing my research for the whole idea about how the dailies were shot and where we got all of these millions of film frames, is when I found out that that Franz said that all of the research, all the visual research, was done using those film frames. And he said he probably looked at over 2 million of them, just compiling the information to make that. So to me, there's an incredible story that I believe from hearing that that Karen can quite readily still talk about, and that's the information that I want to collect out from her and do something on, because the vast majority of Star Trek fans only know her father from the tech manual and the blueprints. And the reality of the situation is, he was so much more behind the scenes, just as Hua Chang was. He operated mainly in fan environment rather than production. Okay, but that doesn't mean anything, because guess what? A very young Greg Jean, a very young Greg Jean, a very young Andrew Probert. I have inside Star Trek newsletters that came from Roddenberry in 60, 68, whatever, and they drew the covers while they were still fans. So the fan community out there really was a lot more influential and far more inside than most people recognize. So sorry to dumpster dive on the Franz Joseph Designs thing, but Paul's been telling me for a long time that I needed to talk to her, and I just figured I'd let him know that I did reach out. I probably should, Tim. I love that movie, but for whatever reason, I'm drawing a blank on it right now. But they probably had that conversation about why they chose a woman's voice, especially since the story, of course, was written by Michael Crichton, who is another person that I immensely respected in his early writing. Now, I will tell you that in the last 5 years or so before his death, his writing, the storylines that he would pick, and he would still write incredible stories, but they got more and more implausible because it was obvious that he was taking positions on controversial social disagreements. Yeah. And so as a result of that, like he wrote a book entirely on climate control, on climate change, and he's 100% right in the whole book. But I thought to myself, you didn't need to do this. Producing Gone with the Wind to tell us that, that global warming is happening is overkill. And he had a few of those. He had one in particular, the book involved included a talking parrot with human intelligence. It was all about a biological company, a biopharmacy, claiming they owned your gene. So theoretically, they owned you in a court of law, and all the things that could go wrong with that. So an amazing author. There's a reason that Spielberg chose him for doing Jurassic Park, or chose that book to make.
That scene was pretty good in Andromeda Strain, where he makes a comment about the computer's voice, and another person comes on and tells him the woman's for like 60 something. She lives so and so somewhere, and she's like 60 something years old, and she makes a living recording computer messages.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah. I gotta acknowledge Manley's comment here. He's absolutely right. That's one of the things most of us remember from him.
Yes.
What's really crazy though is that I've never seen anybody actually mention the similarity, but those mutton chops were the exact same mutton chops that in Dark Shadows that Quentin Collins wore.
Oh yes, yeah.
And of course, he was the werewolf was the added big bad to Dark Shadows because, quite frankly, Jonathan Frid was getting tired. He was the only reason anybody watched the show, and they'll tell you that they always told you that, and the surviving ones today still say the same thing because they literally were canceling the show when they launched his storyline that was going to be your traditional vampire line. Hey, vampire comes in, attacks some people, kills some people, people kill vampire, we go into the next big bad. Nobody expected that it would mesh like that. David Selby walked right into Quentin Collins and became the next, afternoon idol on supernatural soap operas. And then when, of course, I believe it was Falcon Quest, he went on, to become very famous in the 70s on late night or on primetime soap operas. But those same mutton chops, man, every time if I look at either one of them, if I see Quentin Collins in the 1897 run of Dark Shadows, which my wife and I are watching right now, I think of Asimov, and if I see Asimov, I think of Quentin Collins. And when I think of Bad Toupees, I think of Kirk's double doing stuff like this on the screen right here.
There's, I was going to mention Jim when it's still showing up, but Richard Webb, who plays Finney, was also in the episode Return of the Archons. He was one of the townspeople at the beginning when Festival starts. He throws something through the window and turns around, and the camera closes in on him, and he's like, festival. He's got longer hair, but he's actually uncredited, I believe, in that episode. So,
Len, it's so good to hear you again, see you, my friend. I'm an idiot, and I apologize if I've been skipping through your earlier comments because we had a lot of people commenting today, and there's a lot of discussion back and forth amongst themselves. Which thank you guys, because I do get sidetracked, or we simply can't keep up, which is what I'm having an issue with today. So I appreciate that. So Len, I apologize if I did not see an earlier one. I'm very happy to see you back online again.
Yes.
Oh, and something I want to mention to a variety of people. I need to work on it with Roger. We tried it once and we had a little bit of an issue, but I can tell you it works. If you've been watching our regular videos, you know that I put these little inserts inside of them, which quite frankly, a lot of people are unhappy with. But the fact is, to be perfectly honest, guys, the most important thing for me is to hear from you. It is not to keep people happy. So I put in these little things that, that tell you the phone number and encourage you to dial in. And while I'm showing that to you on the screen, I'll play a message that somebody's left, and then I'll run a little text response field to it and then come back out of it and finish the rest of the video. Well, the number that you call in and leave that voicemail on is a live number that I can patch through to one of these. So it is my intention in the near future to actually allow you, if you don't have a computer or you don't want to deal with a computer, to dial in just as if you were calling your favorite radio AM talk show and participate in these live streams. So keep an eye on that in the coming future, because I think we have a lot of people that we may hear, and we may not be able to put faces to names, but we'll put voices to names, I'm pretty sure.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, Paul, I had mentioned the earlier on before you joined. Yeah, I had mentioned Gene's passing.
Yes.
And in all honesty, Paul, I hate to go back and repeat myself to a degree, but I got to, because, buddy, you've been living the dream longer than I have. But I am exceptionally disappointed in almost every Star Trek podcast and content creator that has not gone out of their way in the past week to mention this and put this out as a special. I mean, I've never done an immemorial, period. I didn't do one. I did the three bell silence for Nichelle in front of one of the videos. I've never done an in memoriam, but I did one on every form of social media I could find. I cross-posted to Facebook groups that I normally never do. I don't cross-post, period. And then I put it up in the community, because I think that the unique tie-in, especially of the Galileo to this channel, because that was basically how you guys found me for the most part, because I became obsessed with what really happened to this thing over the years that we didn't know about.
Right.
So yeah, also I think, and Paul can probably tell me yes or no later on down here, I believe that Gene Winfield may have been the very last artisan who made a prop for a Star Trek episode that was still alive at I think it was 97. Yeah, it was. I think it was 97. I don't believe that there's anybody else left, and the last ones we lost were, we had Robert Butler, who survived till I think this past year as well. And I hope I haven't just made him dead if he hasn't died yet, but I think he did pass. But as far as a prop maker, Butler was
the. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. The reactor was that the Jupiter, or the Jupiter whatever in the ad in Brent Circusis? Paul, could you?
I believe that the reactor was the car that they saw. And it's definitely the car that you see all the Shatner promos, because they took a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes pictures with it.
They called it like the Jupiter 7 or something, or Jupiter 8 or something like that in the magazine ad when Spock's flipping through it.
Hey, Spock, boy, do I ever have an email address. You can write me at jim@trek-world.com. And this is the stuff I'd love to see. There is so many things that there's a video that I made a note for last night, and I hope I get a chance to do it, but it's all about timing. I was looking through Star Trek, and I don't even know why. I was looking through James Cawley's Star Trek Phase 2, and I stumbled across Phil, and I'm probably saying his last name wrong, but Phil Keegan, the executive producer, host for The Amazing Race. And it dawned on me, you can see my high-tech video system here. DLC says, "You're done, Jim. Shut up." It dawned on me that there are famous people that have appeared in Star Trek fan productions that we may not know about. And when I say that, I mean, I'm not really interested. I'd love to do a video on them, because I'm not interested in talking about Tim Russ. I'm not interested in talking about the people that we expect, or we go, oh, there's that person again. I'll give you a perfect example of someone is he appeared in the really well done thing that the Axanar people did, Prelude to Axanar. And that was the actor that was from Alien Nation. Right. We've had some people that have appeared in fan production. We know we have people like Ashley Judd that was in Star Trek: The Next Generation, but there were people who actually wanted to be in a fan production because of their love of Star Trek, not because they're going to get paid scale. In many cases, they got paid nothing at all. Okay.
Right.
It hurts, but Mythbusters and us losing Grant Imahara, and him reaching out to Vic because he loved Star Trek and thought, I'd love to be a part of this somehow, anyhow. And it didn't take much to put two and two together and go, well, I think you'd make a good Sulu.
Yep.
So there were people that were involved in these fan productions that might have only been involved once or twice, whose names will surprise you. And I think I really would like to pull that together. So I'm very interested in anything to do with the Star Trek set that you've got there. Because there's so many different ones. I mean, it just, what you said just drew me right into the fan series. But I know that there's so much around the country that people have done. And then there's sets that have relocated. I mean, Neutral Zone Studios, I believe, has relocated by now, but was in the process of relocating months to big fight. I mean, let's face it, quite frankly, there are some licensing issues that needed to be addressed. Jim Cawley was very explicit about them. And in all honesty, he has nothing to gain or lose keeping his mouth shut. It really is a Viacom, Skydance, whoever it is. It's a licensing issue that needs to be addressed one way or the other. Part of the episode where his security is less than optimal. All right. I think that this is Troy. I would say yes, they do, but I do have to keep in mind that musical cues were always horribly overused in the 1960s. To your attention, I draw some of the programs I've mentioned already on this show: Dark Shadows, Kolchak the Night Stalker. If you want to go into Gene Roddenberry, you can go to Wester tapes, the $6 Million Man. Musical cues were much more heavily relied upon in that age of television than they are today, and I don't know why. I really don't know why, because I don't think they've evolved into, oh, we don't do musical cues anymore, we do symphonic orchestrations of transitions. I don't think they evolved like that. I think that they've been replaced or just simply removed as not being necessary, because they were used to drive home an emotional point in almost every case. If you grew up with Days of Our Lives, you can't help the intro every time you watch Close Encounters. Every time you watch Close Encounters and he's building that, the Devil's Tower in his living room, and off on the side, for noise, literally like I do, you hear, McDonald Carey doing, this is McDonald Carey, and these are the days of our lives, stands for the hourglass. And then right after that, you hear the musical cue. Da, 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 da. That cue existed, and the only time I remember it in my life was Days of Our Lives, but here we are. Yep. 50 years later, and I remember it in my fossilized brain. So I think musical cues were probably more important to us back then.
Right.
All right. I treat the secondary hall like a bad neighborhood after dark. Nobody goes down there. A more serious attitude, Dr. Hall. Sorry, her voice is quite luscious. The voice belongs to Miss Gladys Stevens, who is 63 years old. She lives in Omaha. Makes her living taping messages.
Yep.
To make matters worse, she actually recorded that for a company that then turned around and sold it to Apple. So I think she literally was paid scale. I think, it's like, you want to talk about, $2.63 an hour for probably the most recognizable voice on the planet right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And no legal recourse.
Right.
No legal recourse whatsoever. And the sad part is, you can understand it and agree that there's no legal recourse. It was just one of those freak accidents.
Yeah.
But if for nothing else, she has a degree of immortality, because that voice will continue to be the seed voice probably for 100 years or more amongst computers, because people like to build on the familiar. So it may evolve, but that seed of all of those, because the way she described the recording, it wasn't even really like going in and reading a lot of lines. That she did read a lot of lines of stuff, but it was very smart, the company that came up with it, because she was basically reproducing vowel signs and diphthong signs and consonant signs. I keep saying signs, I mean sounds. My senses are getting scrambled. But you get the idea. I mean, It's crazy. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. It is 1 hour and 13 minutes, which means I'm really still a minute ahead of schedule. I'm not keeping you guys too late, as I usually run it for, begin the thing at 1 o'clock or at 15 after. We will do another one of these in 2 weeks. Probably be another of the original series that's available on Pluto. I'd like to exhaust all the ones that are available on Pluto, because they only have stuff from the first season. It's very difficult to find stuff that you can stream without even having to log in and watch it on demand.
Right.
So I'd rather use those before I start wandering into some of the other movies and shows that we'll do. I mean, obviously, I'm going to start bringing Deep Space Nine in before too long. And I'll be honest with you, I'd love to do what we did today, screenshots or closed captions and all for Galaxy Quest. Because, I mean, that is one of the most official and unofficial Star Treks ever done.
Yep.
And I think that every one of us liked it for the same reason. And yet we don't talk very much in a group about Galaxy Quest. We read what people write and we agree with them, but it's very rare that we actually talk about all of Tony Shalhoub's role before Monk in there, and Alan Rickman, who could.
Alan Rickman, yeah.
He did an extraordinary job, because I expected him to do an extraordinary job because we saw him in Die Hard, and we saw him, in Robin Hood and stuff like that. An extraordinary actor. So when he shows up in Galaxy Quest, it's like, oh, are we trying to put a square peg in a round hole here by casting him this way?
Yeah.
But considering the fact that he's playing a bellicose version of Spock, who's upset over the fact that that the main character, Tim Allen's character or whatever, gets all the attention, makes all the money, and in what we hear all the time in Nichelle complaining about, hailing frequencies open, Captain, and then, Alan Rickman is, I grabbed Thor's hammer, and him hating to use the phrase. So yes, that in the very near future, guys, I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to try to rip the captions from it, make a 30-second screen show, and we're going to do that because I'm afraid that if I forget about it, we'll never do it because it's one of those things that crosses your mind. You go, man, that's a great idea, but then the next great idea comes and knocks it out of your head. All right, everybody. So I want to just say, I'm going to scan down through here and just see one more thing.
And Alan Rickman played the bad guy in Quigley Down Under too. So talk about a wide, diverse career. Berkeley had an event called Red Hour Festival. Ooh, it's almost the Red Hour. Yeah, that's from the Return of the Archons. Yeah, nice. Huh? Excellent. Yeah, that's a great episode.
Oh, I detect a Michael on the sideline.
Yeah, Brother Mike's here now. That's what the Beagle Posse was going on about a while ago.
Alan Rickman, I think he was the best one in Galaxy Quest. He really.
Yep.
Andrew Nelson, an actor as Vader, worked in FX for Galaxy Quest. Wow. Paul, I don't want to put you on the spot here. He's a good friend. I mean, I'd love to have him maybe do the live stream with us.
Yeah.
It would be incredible to hear somebody who could drop anecdotes throughout the live stream.
Oh, yeah.
And the nature of it is, I mean, the timing would be, the time is, can he spare, an hour and a half on a Saturday afternoon or something? That would be the critical aspect, I would imagine. But it wouldn't be like he would be cornered like he might be in an interview or a podcast. It's not like he would be cornered into the conversation the entire time. He could literally fade in and out, which, because we can't shut up. Our viewers can't shut up. So, he would very quite possibly die from lack of oxygen because we keep talking.
Well, Jim, I think too, Paul needs to be one of the first folks that we have on one of the live streams that calls in and chats with us because we talked about that before.
I think I originally got the idea because of talking to Paul. We have a lot of people out there, guys, and Greg Jean was one of them. We have a lot of people out there that just they still have phones. They do it the old-fashioned way. And why change? They made it through their entire life on the old-fashioned way, and they're doing quite fine, thank you. So, so I run into some difficulties sometimes with, it's like, oh, this will be great because I get people's ears and they join and they love to talk, but the technology gets in the way. So Paul, thinking about how can I accommodate Paul on this is where I originally came up with, well, you know what? Just look at Sirius XM and do what, what's his name? The shock jock. Howard Stern does. Just give him a phone number and let him call.
Yeah.
We can even have people come in and, we could even have people come stay for a period of time, hang up, and then have somebody else come in, especially the viewers or something like that.
Right.
Anyhow, I'm going to let everybody go. I don't want to tie everybody up because we are now 19 minutes past the hour. So I have 5 minutes longer than I normally do. Thank you very much. We will see each other again in the near future. If you are a patron, please continue to hang out in the studio where we will continue our conversation after the riffraff have left. and we'll talk about all the things that we talk about when people aren't around. I can tell you guys, there's not a whole lot of conversation that's going on right now that isn't related to the work that I'm doing on what I call Star Trek unicorns, like communicators, stuff like that. And of course, the Galileo
video,
Galileo DVD and
the comprehensive story.
All right, folks. So thanks again once for your time. It has been wonderful. I look forward to chatting with you again. If you watch this on a tape delay, please go ahead and leave a comment down. Introduce yourself to the team,
There we go.
we realize that some people can only do after hours because they live in countries other than ours for some reason I do not understand. But hey, I can live with it. Goodbye, everybody. We love you. We'll talk to you
Bye,
again
all.
soon.
Take care.